In today's class, we shall be discussing regarding CS1, the number of chapters which we have, how to go about our preparation, what are the prerequisites, and so on. To begin with, we have 16 chapters as per the latest set of material, which is the 2022 version. So let's quickly take a look at the different chapters. So the first chapter is data analysis, which is basically a theoretical chapter. We wouldn't be starting with this chapter in the class. We would be starting right from chapter 2 onwards. So chapter 2 is nothing but the probability distribution. So this would be setting the, let's say, background to the entire paper. Whatever we do study in chapter 2 is something which would be required in all the later chapters. Then we have chapter 3, generating functions, join distribution, so on, towards chapter number 16. Now, one thing, ones who would be using some previous set of material, be it 2019 version, so on, there the data analysis chapter wasn't there because in 2019, this chapter was part of CM1. Post that, this had been shifted to CS1 paper. Also, if any one of you is using the previous set of materials, there you would see that you could have two chapters. One would be 11A and another would be 11B. Although right now we do not have any such breakup. So in case you are taking a look at any set of pre-recorded lecture, don't look at the chapter number because that might not be matching. Instead, take a look at the name of the chapter. So among all the papers, initial papers, whether it's CM1, CM2, CS1, CS2, CB1, CB2, so on, CS1 has the lowest number of chapters. Preparation wise also, compared to other CM papers or CS2, it takes relatively less time. If you would ask what should be the number of hours you should be putting in, ideally, let's say 3 hours on average till the exams. Assuming you're sitting for the exams in the September session, ones who are attempting it in the July session, again, you should be targeting close to 200 to 250 hours, but that is a very generic figure. The actual number of hours which you need to give could be way higher, or could be even way lower. In CS1, all these chapters are almost related to each other. So if we start with probability distributions, concept of this would be required in generating functions. Similarly, the concept of probability distributions would also be required in joint distributions. Concept of joint distributions would be required in conditional expectations and so on. So it is important that the ones who are attending the live classes, be it the offline or the online, you are being at par with the class, because else in case you're not being at par, you could be in a little bit of difficulty, since you might not be able to follow things. Also, in chapter number 2, probability distributions, it could take just a bit of time. We would be covering a lot of distributions where there would be some sort of memorization. Given the current set of exams, though it's online, I'll be coming to that in detail later. You might not have to memorize stuff, but still, while solving questions, inherently it's assumed that you would be recalling certain formulas. So initially, chapter 2 could look a bit weird to you, especially ones who have prepared earlier for, let's say, paper CM1. But once you practice the questions, you'll get a hang of it, and it is fairly straightforward. Now, the entire syllabus, as you can see, has been divided into 4 parts, where the first part is nothing but basically consisting of chapter number 1 to 5. Then the second part is nothing but consisting of chapter 6 to 9. Then the third part is chapter 10 to 12. And then the final part is chapter 13 to 16. I intend to go from chapter 2 onwards seriously till chapter 16. And then chapter 1 is something which we would be doing towards the end. Note that the classes for paper A and paper B would be going in parallel. It could be that in a certain week, all 4 classes which we have currently scheduled could be of paper A. It could be that 2 classes are of paper A, 2 classes of paper B. It is something depending on how we progress with the syllabus and your preparation, we would be scheduling accordingly. But as of now, our intention is for the next 4 months, we intend to keep on average 4 classes a week. This is including both paper A and paper B. Again, the frequency of classes could increase, keeping in mind of preparation, and in case there are a lot of public holidays or university holidays in line. So this was regarding CS1. Again, compared to the other papers, it's a very scoring paper. CS1 as well as CM1, it is one of those papers where you can actually aim to score 90 plus. It is consistently possible. In other papers, scoring that could become a challenge. But again, here, if you have prepared well, have covered the syllabus twice, solved a lot of faster questions, analyzed your mistakes, you would be in a position to do them. So this was a brief introduction. Now again, the name of the paper I forgot to mention, it's actuarial statistics. So ultimately, whatever we are going to do in this paper is going to be closely related to statistics. There would be certain prerequisite classes which I would be holding. One class would be regarding the basic mathematical concepts drawn from whatever you have studied till class 12. We would be covering that in a single session. Then one session would be devoted towards probability. Again, something which you must have already studied in school, just basic probability definitions, functions, certain formulas. Another class we would be devoting to data, mean, median, mode, different types of graphs, so on. And then another prerequisite class, which is the fourth class, would be devoted towards random variable. So in total, there would be 4 prerequisite classes. First one, school topics. Second one, probability. Third one, the name which I'm using is summarizing data. And the fourth one is random variable. Before 2019 curriculum came in, these were a part of the CT3 syllabus. We would be shortly looking at the mapping as well. Now it is assumed that a student who starts preparing for CS1 would be having knowledge of these. The ones who have prepared for ASET, which is basically the entrance exam for IAI, again, those would be having knowledge of these topics, but the ones who are directly preparing for the first actuarial paper, you might not have knowledge. So we would be covering this through first 4 set of prerequisite classes. So this was regarding the paper structure. Then we also have something called X assignments and Y assignments. So X assignments are nothing but these are basically part wise. You could treat them as mock examinations. So for example, X1 will basically be covering the questions from chapter number 1 to chapter number 5. So once you're done fully preparing for chapter 1 to chapter 5, let's say you could attempt X1. Similarly, we have X2, X3 and X4. Y1 and Y2 is basically for the paper B part. As for the tutorials 4 days section, this is something which you can ignore. This is just something which the institute gives to give you a brief background with respect to the time you need to devote to cover these topics. That is something we would be covering separately. Next thing, also just to give you a rough idea with the number of classes which I would be requiring for the paper A part to cover the conceptual topics. For probability distributions, we are planning to take 4 classes. For generating functions, it would be a single class. For joint distribution, it could be either a single long class, let's say 3 hours, or it could be 2 classes. Conditional expectation is something which would be it would be a one short class, or I could club it with joint distributions itself. So you can think chapter 4 and chapter 5 combined, we would be having, let's say, 2 classes of 2 hours each. Central limit theorem will take 1 class. Chapter number 7 will take 1 class. Point estimation, we should be taking 2 classes. Similarly, confidence interval, hypothesis testing, these would be taking 2 classes each. Correlation, again, it should ideally take us 1 class, but we could stretch it out to 2 as well. Note that from correlation onwards, there would be certain topics which might not be, let's say, being covered in paper A by me, but that is something Gunjan would be taking in the paper B part, since the majority part of its application could be with respect to the R programming. Then linear regression is something which should take maximum of 2 classes. GLM, 3 classes in total could be required for this. Bayesian statistics, credibility theory combined, it should take us 2 classes. And EBCT, it should take 1 separate class. So if we just calculate, and for chapter 1, we would have, let's say, another 1 class. So just a tentative figure, if you would see for the conceptual lectures we would be having is 1 plus 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 23, 25, 26. Close to 25 classes is what we would be having for CS1A. These are just covering the conceptual part. Obviously, there would be certain other sessions where we would be taking the doubt classes, or we would be solving the past questions or the questions given in the material, so on. As for the paper B part, this is something Gunjan would be discussing separately as with respect to how many classes there could be. Another thing, for ones who are preparing for the first actuarial paper, the calculator which you would be requiring is, let me just write the model name on the screen itself. This is the calculator which would be recommended to be used. It's basically Casio FX82 ES Plus. You can order it online. It should be available on Amazon or Flipkart or any local shop. Again, alternative calculators are allowed. Right now, given that exams are intended to remain online for September 2022 IFoA session as well as July 2022 IA session. Now for IFoA, right now, given the online set of exams, there is no restriction on the calculator to be used. You could use even higher version calculators, which could perform certain integrations and all, but it is not recommended because whatever things we need to do, it's actually possible using this calculator. In case you want to perform certain higher level calculations, given that the exams are open book in nature, you could always take the help of Google to perform any sort of calculations. So for our purpose in the class, we would be referring to this particular calculator. Ones who haven't bought this, please do get this as soon as possible. This was regarding the calculator requirement. Next thing, there's a particular material which you all are allowed to use during your examinations. Whether it was offline exams before COVID happened or for the online examinations. So what that is basically what we call actuarial tables, and more commonly for our purpose we simply refer it to as tables. Note that there would be a tables functionality which is there in calculator, that is different. This is basically actuarial tables. So let me just give you a quick look at that. So this is basically the actuarial tables. It's roughly of around 200 pages. You are allowed to use this in your examination, whether it is from IIM or whether it is from IFoA. Previously, when the exams were held offline in nature, IFoA used to provide their set of tables during examinations. So you were not supposed to carry them. But for IA examinations, you had to carry the hard copy of this particular actuarial tables. So what this does is, the first thing which you should be looking at is basically the content section, which will give you an idea of what all is covered here. So as you will see, we have certain mathematical methods in page number 2 till page number 5. From page number 6, we have statistical distributions. From page number 22, we have statistical methods. Then from page 31, we have compound interest and so on. For our purpose, we would be interested, in the mathematical methods section. We would be shortly taking a look, what all formulas are given there. Statistical distributions, which is the main part which we would be covering in chapter 2, which is probability distributions. You will see that a lot of formulas are given over there. So you could think that there is no explicit need to memorize them. You just need to, practice so much at the back of the mind to remember all the formulas so that you can save on time while, solving the particular questions. Then finally, we would also be looking at towards the end here. So it's given till page number 45. From page number 160 onwards, we'll again see that is the particular part which we would be requiring in our CS1 syllabus. So again, I won't be covering all the pages. As and when we would be covering a particular chapter, we would keep referring to the common set of pages required from tables which we need to use. Right now, just to give a background, if you will see in the first page, you basically have the expansion of e to the power x, then you have log 1 plus x, again the expansion of that, then you have the binomial expansion, you again have a negative binomial expansion. We would be covering this in later sections. Some of this could be relatable to what you have studied so far in your college level or at your school level. Then we have again certain formulas for calculus. Integration by parts is something all of you must have studied in school level. So if you see, there's a particular formula given for that as well. It's again the same what you have studied at the school level. Then we have double integrals, we have differentiating and integral. Then there is another certain methods. We have a interpolation method, which is basically a Newton-Raphson method. Then we have integrating factors. So in case you have a differential equation, how to go about solving those. Again, something which is not required in CS1, just covering it for completeness. This particular page is something you won't be requiring for CS1 as such. Then we would be looking at gamma function, certain properties. Then there's the base formula. something which you should have studied at a school level in probability based theorem. This is nothing but just a representation of that. And then comes the statistical distributions. There are various distributions. So for the classes, always do bring actuarial tables, because while solving questions, you would be requiring this. So this was regarding actuarial tables. Next, coming to the paper pattern or the format of exam, be it you're appearing from IAI or IFoA. So let me just highlight that. So CS1, it basically has two components. One is the paper A. You could refer it as the theoretical component or the written part. Next is basically paper B. Both are of 100 marks. Whether it is from IAI or whether it is from IFoA, both are of 100 marks. Now, for IFoA, as I mentioned, April 2022, it's assumed to be online only. It's not assumed, rather, they have already mentioned it's going to remain online only. So it's going to be an open book examination, whether it's paper A part, paper B part. How they come up with the pass percentage or the pass marks is, they basically give 70% weightage to the marks you have secured in paper A and 30% weightage to the marks secured in paper B. Using this, they come up with the marks out of 100, on the basis of which you either clear the paper or you fail the paper. Now, the historical pass marks for CS1 has been roughly between, let's say 53 to 60. On a very conservative basis, we would be taking that, let's assume that 60 should be the passing marks. Again, the pass marks for a particular term is something which is released only once the results for that particular term is out. Before that, we won't be knowing. Just for our own, let's say, discussion purpose, we would be assuming that the pass marks is going to remain somewhere around 60 only. This is for basically IFoA. For IAI, again, there's paper A, paper B, both are of 100 marks. Now, the thing is, they haven't been a bit clear with respect to whether there's a 70% or 30% weightage or not. Why? Because just before getting into that, in IFoA, there is no separate pass marks for a paper A or a paper B. Theoretically speaking, you could, let's say, score a 90 out of 100 in paper A and let's say 10 out of 100 in paper B. Once I give the 70% and 30% weightage, your combined marks would be coming out to be 66 out of 100. And this in all certainty would ensure that you are clearing the paper. So as you will see, there is no individual pass criteria for paper A and paper B. For IAI, we do not know whether this is the case or not. The pass marks for IAI examination has been set as 50. These are actually true for all the examinations. Now, when I say that the pass marks is 50, and if, which IAI had previously mentioned, that there you need to individually pass paper A and paper B, which basically means you need to score 50 in both paper A and paper B. And the moment to do that, this concept of 70% and 30% doesn't come into the picture, at least for passing purpose. For getting the final marks on which basis you could feel good if you're scoring high marks or in case you're securing a rank. Apart from that, for passing purpose, if you're scoring at least a 50 in paper A as well as paper B, then you would be clearing the examination. Next, coming to how the format of current set of assessments are to be. So first, let me talk about IAI July 2022 session. It's gonna remain online format. Paper B, usually there could be anywhere between 3 to 6 questions using R programming. For paper A part, you need to basically type out on that particular platform which IAI provides. It is nothing but basically to do with mathematical typing itself. So now MCQs are a part. You could get MCQs of anywhere between, let's say, 10 to 30 marks, in paper A part. You are not expected to provide steps. You just need to write down a particular answer. Each MCQ could be of 1 mark, or it could also be as high as, let's say, a 4 mark. This is for IAI. Going forward, for the December 2022 session, IAI has shown intention to conduct the exams in offline format. So how that would be there is something we need to wait for, because previously there were no MCQ in the paper A part. For IFoA September 2022 session, paper B is again the usual format, could have anywhere between, let's say, 3 to 6 questions. You need to use R programming, and for the paper A part, you could expect some MCQs, could be anywhere between 10 to 15 marks. In other papers, that is CM1A, CM2A or CS2A, no MCQs have come, but in CS1A they have consistently given certain MCQs. Unless some other new guidelines are released at a later date, at least as of date, you could expect, let's say, around 10 to 15 marks of MCQ. And whenever you're writing answers for MCQ, you just need to give the correct option. You are not required to write the entire option also, or how you have come out with the solution for that. That is not required in examination. Again, all these things are true as of date. In case there are any changes in guideline, we would be informing you in the groups itself. So this is regarding the format of exam. Pass marks is something I've already covered. For II, it is fixed at 50. For IFoA, you could take it to be 60 itself on a conservative basis. Then what all materials we are going to give you for practice? First of all, we would be sharing the institute material with all of you. That is of 2022 version. In case you are using an earlier version, it is fine. Do keep in mind, you can always go to IFoA website, look at the upgrades which they have made from 2019 onwards. So just in case if any one of you is using the previous set of material, you can take that as reference. Just look at 3 more PDFs. That first PDF is basically the changes from 2019 to 2020. Second will be from 20 to 21. Third will be from 21 to 22. Now, majorly there have been few additions in 2019 curriculum, be it in confidence interval chapter or hypothesis testing, as well as the chapter data analysis. Previously, it was there in CM1. So right now it has been shifted to paper CS1. It's a completely theoretical chapter. Along with that, we would be sharing revision notes. Now keep in mind the edition which we would be sharing is of 2019. It will be making no difference to you all whether you're attempting the exam in 2022, in 2023 or in any year, as long as the current set of examination structure remains the same. That is, if the content of CS1 remains to be same, there might be minor additions or subtraction, but you can continue to use this 2019 version. The reason for that is that a lot of recordings which we have created over the past years have been using the 2019 version. So the numbering is all as per the 2019 version itself. You could use 2020-21 version, but again, there is no compulsory need for doing that. Now keep in mind, while using the revision notes 2019. So what revision notes 2019 is, revision notes basically covers the past year questions from IFoA, segregated topic wise. So let's say we have, I guess we had 7 booklets. Let me just check that once. Yes, so we have in total 7 booklets in CS1. Booklet 1 is corresponding to the hard copies or the soft copies which you would be using will have chapter 1 probability distribution. So this is chapter 1. This is according to 2019. As per 2022, this is nothing but basically chapter number 2. Booklet 2 will basically have chapter number 2 to 4. As per 2019 version, as per 2022 version, this would constitute chapter 3 to 5, and so on. We have it till 7 booklets. So again, don't get confused with the chapter numbers given in the revision notes. Just look at the chapter names and you can relate to which is relevant for 2022 section. Note that the clusters of chapters remains the same. So chapter 2 to 4 actually corresponds to same as chapter 3 to 5. You might have a question, what about chapter 1 which is there in 2022? So there had been no questions till 2019 from chapter 1. Post that, you already have examination papers as well as solutions available directly on the website. So you can take a look at the 2019, 20, 21 as well as 22 versions or any later versions if you are looking at this lecture later on. And you can just see what sort of questions have come from chapter number 1. Before 2019, you wouldn't find any past year examination questions as this wasn't a part of our syllabus. So this is the most important practice point. How you should go about your studying is, let's say, once I've covered a particular concept in the class, you have to take a look at the material, go through it in detail, practice all the questions. At the end of each chapter, there are more questions to practice. You should be attempting that. Let's say you complete chapter number 2. Now you see that in revision notes, there is a separate booklet entirely devoted to this chapter, you would be solving the questions of this. Let's say once you're done with this, you should be studying simultaneously for the paper B part as well. Now again, it could be if you are in a particular flow, you want to cover, let's say 2-3 chapters of paper A part, you could do that. Or let's say you're lacking in paper B and you want to study for a couple of weeks paper B, you could do that. But don't leave the paper B part for the last 1 month or 2 months. Try to be at par with what we are doing in the class itself. A week or two lag is fine, that could be there. You might have certain events at home, you could be having examinations. Apart from that, try to be at par with the class. This will just ensure that all your doubts are being resolved in a very timely manner, and you will just have more time to try out more stuffs, try to solve questions in different ways apart from what we teach, or what is there in the solutions itself. Towards the examinations, you will not have the luxury of so much of time. You yourself would be extremely exam oriented, trying to cover as many questions as possible. So right now, try to solve it your own way and avoid looking at the solutions. As long as you have the luxury of time, avoid looking at the solutions. If you are able to solve it yourself, trust me, that has a different understanding altogether. Because once you take a look at solution, you might feel okay, they are solving it in this way, you understand it. But what happens is ki again, when you would try to solve it yourself, you might get stuck, because while reading you think okay, this makes sense, but at the time of writing you would question more, ki why is this question being solved in this way, what way had come to your mind, whether that is the correct way or not. So try to attempt all questions by yourself. In case you can't, obviously solutions are there, look at them, but don't look at them in a very convenient way. You look at one question, you don't even give it a shot yourself, and then you just look back at the solution itself. If you're short on time, let's say 1 or 2 months before examination, it's a different thing altogether. But ideally, you should be attempting all these questions yourself. So revision notes, solving questions from this remains the most critical part, whether you're appearing from IAI or IFoA. Note that IAI does not have any such material on their own. They are using all resources provided by IFoA itself. So ones who want to attempt the questions of IAI, you do not have any such segregated chapters clustered wise. You can directly go to their website, take a look at the past papers, and solve it accordingly. Ones who are appearing from IFoA, you should be targeting to complete all questions from 2005 to 2022. Ones who are appearing in 2022, to cover all past papers of IFoA, that is a bare minimum you should be targeting. A lot of these, almost of 10 years, would be covered while solving questions from 2019. The rest, let's say remaining years, is something you should be looking to give under mock exam scenario or mock exam condition. Once you're done with the syllabus, you should be basically solving these papers under exam conditions. And if you have more time, you want to practice more, your next step should be to start with II papers. Just keep in mind, go backwards. Start from 2022 and go backwards. The reason for that is 5 years before, the level of difficulty which you would be seeing in II paper is very high. So you might get demotivated looking at the questions. If you would have heard from your seniors or not, there was a single session in II, if I'm recalling it correctly, March 2011 attempt or May 2011, not a single student had cleared the CS1 equivalent paper. I had also tried to solve that paper, could solve hardly 50 marks of paper itself. So that's a very, very difficult paper. Other than that, also other years, you'll see that there is a genuine difference in the difficulty of questions with what you have right now and what was there previously in the II papers. Ones who are appearing from II, you should be targeting to solve all the papers. Again, just keep in mind that the level of difficulty will keep on increasing as you go towards the past years. Although right now, relatively, the exams are coming out to be way more easier even in II as well. So this was regarding how you should go about with the preparation. This was for the paper A part. Now coming to the online examination, ones who have already appeared for a paper, be it CM1, mostly before CS1, or even some other paper like CS2 or CM2, you would have an idea regarding mathematical typing or using notation sheet for IFoA exams. You can continue with your preparation directly on Word itself if you want to do. If you want to, first of all, prepare on paper, after a couple of months, start on Word, you could do that. Ones who would be appearing for their first actual examination, for the first 2-3 months, I could suggest you all, you continue practicing on paper itself, get a grip of the concepts. Once you start getting a grip, or let's say you're halfway done with the course, start practicing everything on MS Word. So this, what you should target is, we have 16 chapters. Once let's say we have done with the first 8 chapters or not, or so, both paper A and paper B, you should then naturally, start progressing towards doing everything on Word itself. Keep in mind, you should be giving yourself at least 2 months to be, practicing on MS Word. Please keep in mind, even ones who are working feel that the typing speed is pretty good. Since this involves mathematical typing, the amount of time you would need could be way higher. The efficiency would be coming only through natural practice. Consistently, there are students, who, let's say, who are studying for 6 months for a paper. First 5.5 months, they are doing everything on paper, and then they leave just last 2 weeks or so for mathematical typing part. They struggle to complete the paper. Although they know the entire solutions, they're not in a position to, solve it. Some of you have the tendency that, you would prefer to solve everything first on paper and then you want to type it out. If that works for you, fine. Just that could take double time, because first you're trying to solve everything on paper and then you need to type out everything on Word. If that helps you, be it so. Other than that, ideally you should be doing everything on Word and tuning your mind. Writing it is a different experience. Typing it out, you do not need to only think about the next step. You also, first of all, will require time to know, how to go about typing those symbols. Be it symbols like sigma, summation, pi, all these things, it will take you some time. So you will not be only thinking about the next step, but you would simultaneously be thinking, how to go about typing this. So this will require some time. But if you have practiced well, you would be in a position where you can complete the paper in the given time format. Students have completed 100 marks of paper. They have scored 90 plus in both paper A and paper B. So that is very much doable. In other papers, leaving CM1, honestly, scoring even 80 plus is very difficult. But CS1 and CM1 are the papers where, you can actually score pretty high marks. So do target that. Then mapping to the old curriculum. So the chapters which we have over here, data analysis is something which was not part of our any curriculum before 2019. Chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, all of these things were there in the previous curriculum. I would be shortly naming the name of the paper as well. There have been some additions to confidence interval and hypothesis testing, very minor additions, but mostly they are same as what they were previously. There have been, certain additions in the form of, let's say, chapter 11 correlation, and some additions in chapter 12 as well. Chapter 13, 14, 15, 16 again is something which was there in the previous curriculum as well, although in a different paper. So of all the 16 chapters, chapter 1 is something which is new. Whenever I mention new, I'm taking 2019, pre-2019 curriculum as reference, and there would be certain parts in chapter number 9, 10, 11, and 12. Other than that, in most of the other chapters, what was there previously is what we have currently as well. So you would be having, ample number of questions to practice as well. As for the paper name, so CS1 basically mostly corresponds to CT3 paper. This was the name of the paper before the 2019 curriculum came in. So these are corresponding to basically chapters number 2 to 12, if I'm not wrong. Yes, chapter number 2 to 12 you could relate it to, and chapter number 13 to 16. This is part of basically CT6 paper. So what what they have done is, they have mostly taken topics out of CT6. They have given most of the chapters to paper CS2, some parts to paper CS1, and some parts to paper CM2. So the CT6 paper has been breaking the topics of it, and it has been combined with other examination. So till from 2019, you will be solving basically CS1 paper, but before 2019, you need to solve the entire CT3 paper, because almost all the topics which were there are there in the current syllabus. Minor topics might not be a part of the current syllabus. That is something I'll keep informing you in due course of time. And you need to basically look at those 3-4 topics from CT6. So the entire CT6 paper is not something which you need to solve. let's say you'll have 2 to 4 questions from every paper, which would be relevant for your CS1 syllabus. So keep this in mind while downloading papers directly from IFoA website or IA website. This is basically the papers you need to keep in mind for CS1. Now, this is what I had. Apart from that, as for the idle hours to devote, I've already mentioned. Ones who are working currently, obviously you have a constraint of time. You should try to devote as many hours possible for you or over weekends. But the ones who are currently doing an undergraduate course or a postgraduate, relatively speaking, you have more luxury of time. So there should not be any restriction of hours. You want to study 2 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours, study as much as you can. And what I would suggest is ki instead of putting a cap on the hours, target completing topics. You start with a particular topic. Let's say you need to make an initial estimate. Let's say you start with chapter 2. Maybe it could take you 8 to 10 hours. So you could think, okay, if I'm studying on average 4 to 5 hours, your target should be, I should be completing this in the next 2 days. Now, if you have completed by devoting less time, you can utilize other time to do other activities. In case it's requiring more time, do it. Instead of putting it just hours wise, try to crack it. You are aiming to complete it in 2 days, 3 days, so on. Again, while putting any targets, don't put over ambitious targets that will study 20 hours in a day. You will end up being disappointed. Get an idea from us or yourself, how much time ideally it should take that as a benchmark, and then relatively, target to complete a particular topic in 1 day, 2 day, 3 day, and so on. Ideally, you should be targeting to covering all the classes, conceptual classes, whether it's paper A or paper B, reading the entire material, covering the practice questions given in the material, as well as the questions of revision notes, at least once, 4 to 6 weeks before examination. Again, ones who are joining in late, for them it is a different thing, but ones who are starting right when the batches are starting for the September term or even the December session, I would say, mostly for the September session, you should be targeting to complete all of this, 4 to 6 weeks before examination. We ourselves are targeting to complete the syllabus latest by 8th of August. And for CS1, it is something, we could complete it beforehand as well. So again, the pace is something which would be more dependent how you go about with your own preparation. In case you're going at par, we might be able to cover up the syllabus beforehand as well. The last 4 to 6 weeks is something you should be focusing primarily on solving papers. And when I say solve papers, it does not mean you solve the paper, you forget it. You take a paper, devote 3 hours, 3.5 hours, you solve the paper. Next 2 hours is something you're going to check your paper against the solutions provided. You're going to give yourself marks. A lot of you ask if certain steps are correct, certain steps are incorrect, how much marks should I give? Again, honestly, these are very subjective in nature. At times in the solutions made available by the institute itself, you would have a proper marks breakup scheme. But in case you do not have, and you want to self correct it, give yourself a range of marks. So let's say if it's a 6 marks question and you have made certain errors in certain steps, so it could be that you could get, let's say, anywhere between 3 to 5 marks. If you feel there are 10 steps which you had to produce and you got, let's say, 6 or 7 of them right, so you could think you should be getting at least 60% of the total marks. And then using that, you can just give yourself a range. Let's say 3 on a very conservative basis and 5 on a very optimistic basis. Do it for all the questions. In this way, you will get a range of marks for your paper. And then you can see yourself, what is your range. Ideally, you should be consistently scoring 75 plus for your CT3 papers. Those were generally, relatively easier. And for CS1 papers also, although the pass marks is lower, but for the paper A part, you should be in a position where you are consistently scoring 75 to 80. Wherever you are making mistake, note down separately in a piece of paper. Okay, this is the topic, it belongs to this chapter, so that once, let's say, you have solved 10-20 papers, you will have a sheet readily available having the summary of where you're going wrong. At times you all think you are a weak at a particular topic, but when it comes to solving questions in examination, you are consistently being able to solve it. You might not have complete conceptual clarity regarding it, but still you can solve the question and get the marks. And there could be certain chapters where you feel very confident, but still you are losing marks, be it for silly errors or any sort of error. So instead of believing in your prior beliefs, what is more important is that once you're solving the papers, look at the data you're generating. That will help you to identify your weak area, and that is where you need to work. So your last month should be completely on solving papers. So if you're solving CT3 paper, you should be giving yourself close to, let's say, 3 hours or so. And next, let's say, depending how much things you're getting right, if you're getting most of the things right, correction will take maybe half an hour. So in case you're getting a lot of things wrong, it could take you even 2 to 3 hours, because first you need to correct, you need to mark yourself. If everything is correct, it's very easy to give yourself full marks. But if certain steps are wrong, we need to spend more time to see whether those mistakes have been carried forward to the other parts or not, so on. And then you should also be looking at their solution and then trying to see where you went wrong and whether you're understanding the solution or not. So all this, let's say you are getting, if you're getting, let's say, 70 to 80% of the paper correct and the other wrong, then within 2 hours you should be able to cover everything. So your 1 hour could be taking 5 hours in total. 3 hours of, let's say, giving the paper and 2 hours in checking. Again, as for giving the paper, ones who have already appeared for the online exams, if you're comfortable with your typing speed, you could, appear for the most of the papers on paper itself, just for the interest in time. But do ensure that you do solve certain number of papers on Word itself, just to see whether you're being able to complete the paper in the given time or not. Ones who are appearing for their first examination in the form of CS1, once you've done with the syllabus, again, initial few couple of papers, you could solve it on paper. Once you gain confidence, naturally you should be shifting everything on MS Word itself. So on MS Word, you should be giving yourself 3 hours, 20 minutes. Keep in mind the past year papers, let's say of 2005 to 2010 onwards, those could be very much derivation intensive. Those type of questions is something which might not come in current set of examinations with that frequency. Do keep in mind derivations can come. This year they have come in a very high proportion, whether it's paper CS1, CS2 or even CM2. So derivations can come. Just keep in mind that when it was pen and paper, a higher number of derivation could come because you were solving on paper, it's possible. But on MS Word, going through all the steps will not be possible. So you might not be getting, let's say, 30, 40 or 50% of content in the form of questions which involves a lot of mathematical typing, but you still would be getting them. So just keep in mind, while solving the very old year papers, you might not be able to solve them in 3 hours or 3 hours 20 minutes completely. That is fine. But for any paper after 2019 onwards, you should be in a position to solve them within the stipulated time. If you're appearing from IFoA, currently it's 3 hours 20 minutes, and if you're appearing from INEC, you get basically 3.5 hours. So this is regarding the structure. Anything else, any doubts you would want to ask? How to plan out, how to go about a preparation or anything else? Feel free, you all can unmute yourself and ask your query.
So which type of practice is using equation?
Okay, so one of you was asking is which approach to use. This is relevant for basically ones appearing, more relevant to ones appearing from IFoA. You have the option to use equation editor, which is basically the mathematical typing. Alternatively, you can use the notation sheet produced by IFoA, or use any other your own notation which makes sense to the examiner. As for which one is a better option, I would say this is very subjective in nature. Some students prefer the notation sheet one, some students prefer using mathematical notations itself. I would say practice on your own, and whichever way you are more comfortable in. There is no preferable method as such. If you had appeared for any previous paper, you were using notation sheet, I would say use that as reference, start using in that way. But yes, do give the other method a chance as well, just to see how much time it is taking you. Keep in mind, ones who have prepared for mostly CM1 earlier, that had lot of symbols, where you had to use lot of subscript and superscript, and that could be little bit time consuming if you go by mathematical typing. For CS1, I don't think so that should be the case. We have lot of statistical symbols or Greek letters and so on. Those are something which should be basically one step in nature. You will be having those symbols. You just need to go and press on them, and you should be getting it. So this is again something very much individual driven, whether you want to use the notation sheet which IFoA shares. So when I say notation sheet, it's just that instead of writing sigma over Word, you can write it in Word. sigma. So either of this is acceptable, or if you want to use any other short form, just keep in mind, think yourself to be an examiner, not in a very good mood while correcting the exam. Now, if you can make sense out of the notation, it means it's fine. If you cannot make sense, do not use it. So again, avoid using all text language and all short forms and all even while typing. So you cannot write because as B, C, O, Z while writing any answers. These are not accepted. Notations, you can give it in words. That is completely fine. Which one you need to use is completely your choice. Give it a practice, see, and that is why I say you document the time. At times you feel this is more painful compared to this, but it could be that while actually typing it out, this maybe takes, let's say hypothetically 1 second, and this takes you, let's say 2 to 3 seconds. In that case, using this option would be more efficient. So whatever you're doing, whenever you are confused which method to use, just see where you are comfortable in when it comes to reading your answers, coming to the next steps. So obviously, I guess reading this is way more easier than reading this. If you're writing a lot of notations, then instead of writing in words, this is a lot more easier. So that is one advantage of using equation editor. But obviously the secondary thing is key. You might not be comfortable using it. In that case, you could prefer to use sigma itself. Either would be accepted. For IAI, there is no notation sheet as such. Again, there also you have the freedom either to use sigma, this form or this form. Just that they do not have any predefined notation sheet. IFoA had released a notation sheet where it gives examples of what students could use in let's say text instead of using the symbols. No such let's say document has been released by II. So anything whichever you think suitable, in case you have a doubt, do ask us. Don't come up with anything which is not very obvious to the examiner. So this is regarding mathematical typing. It's more to do how, or how you are comfortable in. Anything else, others? Any thing else you would want to ask? Any doubts regarding paper, structure, pattern?
So in the same one, for the starting questions, we had also an additional set of questions for something else.
In CS1, no. In CS1, we would be basically referencing to the material, the questions at the end of the material, and then the revision notes itself. And again, if you're done with, to begin with, your target should be getting everything of material done, X assignments done, Y assignments done. That is for paper B. For paper A, getting revision notes done and pass the papers from 2005 to 2022 of IFoA to begin with. Once you're done with this, you want more questions, attempt IAI ones. And if you're done with that as well, you ask me, I'll get more questions. It could be from college, college tech books or university books and all. First thing you should be targeting is IFoA and IAI past papers. That should be the main thing. Apart from that, see, there is no point of me coming up giving more 10 fancy questions and all, because that is what is there in the syllabus, and that is something you should be completing first before moving to any other sort of questions. Also keep in mind, I am not going to give any separately MCQ questions as such, because the proportion of questions which come through MCQ is slightly less. Also, you do not know which type of question could come in MCQ or not. It could be that a particular question in one term was given in MCQ format, let's say, where you just need to select the correct option. To solve it, you had to solve it on paper, let's say 3-4 steps. The same question could be asked in a normal format as well. So if I give you only MCQ based questions, your tendency would be just to get the answer and not focusing on how to represent the steps. So we're not going to give you that. Focus on solving each and every question in a particular format. And obviously, if you have MCQs and examination, ultimately also to solve it, you need to go through the steps. Just that you can be a bit more untidy with your steps while doing it on a rough sheet, but your approach should remain the same only. So as of now, we do not intend to give any MCQ questions as such for practice. Anything else? Any other doubt? Ones who are attending the live online session, anyone of any doubts? This is all from my end for this particular session. Just had to give an introduction regarding the paper and all. Also keep in mind, it's a relatively easier paper. If you have prepared, covered whatever I've mentioned, be it material questions, revision notes, and even past year questions of one single institute, you should be in a position where you are, extremely well prepared for the examinations, and you should be clearing it in all certainty. Anyone? Any other doubt you would want to ask? Feel free to ask. Anything else, specifically the ones who are going to appear for their first examination in the form of CS1? Sure, then we'll wrap it up over here. Next class would be in the next week, and I might increase the frequency of classes as well, given that the first chapter I could take 3 to 4 classes. So I would just prefer it to keep it at a continuum. Instead of taking just 2 classes in a week, I could keep either 2 classes on a day, or let's say a class every day itself. Whatever timings are there for additional classes would be there. I would be posting them in the group. Keep in mind the normal timings for CS1 is basically 11 a.m. on Tuesday and Thursday, and on Saturday and Sunday it is 10 a.m. So that is the normal timings. This weekend there are no classes as such. From next week there would be classes on weekend as well. Whether it's paper A or paper B, we would be informing you beforehand in case you need to carry your laptop. So yep, this is all from my end. I'll wrap up the class then. See you all in the next class. Thank you.